Welcome to this week's Who the Folk podcast. I'm Lonny Goldsmith, the editor of TC Jewfolk. This week I talk with Kara Rosenwald, the mission coordinator of the Minneapolis Jewish Federation's Experience Israel 2023 trip. We talk about what led her to take this role on, debrief on some of the highlights of the trip, and get a little hint about what's coming next for her on this week's Who the Folk podcast. Kara Rosenwald, welcome to the Who the Folk podcast. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, thanks for having me, Lonny.
So you are the mission coordinator. Is that the official title? Mission coordinator for the...
The official title is the Experience Israel 2023 Mission Coordinator. Yes, coming up with an abridged version was something talked about for many reasons.
I would imagine. It's tough to... that's an elevator pitch, not a title.
Yes.
You are the person who... responsible for the Experience Israel 2023, making sure we got to where we wanted to go, the signups, the questions. You were the point person from the Minneapolis Jewish Federation side. So as a participant, thank you very much. It was amazing. But before we get into the details of the trip itself, I'm sort of curious, going back a little bit. I've known you for quite a while, mostly as my oldest child's 8th grade teacher at Talmud Torah of Minneapolis. Your background is in education. What was appealing to you about this opportunity that a couple years ago when Federation posted it, you decided to make that move?
Sure. So I've worked for a variety of different nonprofit Jewish organizations my entire career. I started with Hillel in San Diego. I worked for United Synagogue Youth in Virginia. Coming here to Minnesota, ended up at the Talmud Torah in Minneapolis, which was a bit of a legacy piece for me. My dad's a graduate of the Talmud Torah in Minneapolis. Part of that position was organizing the 8th grade DC trip, which I took over from Mary Baumgarten doing for many years. She had so many years of experience in that trip, and it was part of the 8th grade, so that was a neat thing for me to do trip coordinating that way. And at the same time, being a part of the community, I served as a community person on the Global Experiences Committee at Federation. And so part of volunteering for that committee was hearing about things that the community had planned for the future. This was pre-COVID, in a different time. And Leo was on that committee with me and had brought this idea from his experience in Miami with that mega mission. And at the time I thought, well, that sounds like a really neat trip. And then they were talking about how they would hire someone specifically to put the trip together. At the time, I was employed by Talmud Torah Minneapolis, also working for Camp Ramah in California, working on their family retreats and their all-inclusive Passover program. And I thought, well, someone will get that job. And then COVID happened. And the family programs I was doing for Camp Ramah in California, as well as the Passover programming, came to a quick halt.
Yes.
And... just in re-envisioning what was going to be next for me, during COVID, I ended up getting my master's and just took some time to reevaluate what was going to come next. This position got posted for the mission coordinator, and I thought, this is what I want to do next. This sounds really neat, and applied for the job and interviewed with Sleel, and the rest is history.
So we don't have a whole lot of distance, so little... insider, we are sitting in your office here at the Berry Family Campus and the Federation offices. You've been home for 5 or 6 days at this point after your extension trip that you staffed to Petra, which I heard from people was amazing.
It was phenomenal.
I heard it was incredible. Did the experience sort of live up to what you thought it could be?
The Experience Israel trip?
Yes.
Yes. I mean, look, anything Federation does has a lot of intent behind it. There was really clear goals set out for the goals on the mission, not only during the trip itself, but for the community and also what we're bringing back to the community. Those goals started being hit in all the pre-trip programming that we did. It wasn't just about taking people from the community to Israel for 8 days. It was monthly sessions, either on Zoom or in person, for people to get to know each other. So we were building community before we got there. And because of those, and because of the excitement of the trip, that first night in Jerusalem, when we were at Beit Shmuel and everybody was coming together and we had our, character actors dressed up in different costumes from pre-1948 and everyone was excited to see each other and realize where we were. I think from that moment, I just thought, this is happening. This is all really happening, and the community's coming together. And you just felt it. You felt the excitement. People were getting to know each other. You know, we asked everyone to wear their name tags for a variety of reasons. But one of them definitely just made it so it was easy to know everyone's names. Just the simple reason behind a name tag.
Right.
And everybody walked in with a smile. Everyone was, you know, excited to figure out who was sitting next to them, who was standing next to them. And yeah.
One of the things, so you mentioned Leo, that is Leo Zabazinski, who's one of the 6 co-chairs of the trip, along with his wife Lauren, Debbie and Jed Stillman, Rita and Ron Kellner. They're co-chairs, name all of them. But I had the pleasure of sitting next to Leo on the bus ride when we left Jerusalem to go for the classic Israel elective. And I use the word elective intentionally there, and I'll explain why to the listeners. You know, Leo had said to me, he's like, we could have done this easy. We could have said, this is your bus. This is the group you're with the whole time. These are the things we're going to do. We're going to go all over the country, and then we'll leave in a week. But there was a choose your own adventure component to it where we got to choose electives. So for me, who had never been to Israel, doing the classic Israel, Masada, Dead Sea trips, on the way back to Mitzpeh Ramon, like that was important to me, having never done that. That created, I can only imagine, a significant logistical challenge for you and the staff in building the trip. Is that right?
Yes, and. So early on, when Minneapolis Jewish Federation was encouraging people to sign up for this trip, one of the questions that was heard very often from people that had been to Israel before is, I've been to Israel before, why should I go on this trip? Or, you know, what's going to be different? Those questions were being asked at the same time where the trip was really, the idea was there'd be 3 days of electives, that it wasn't a track that you were picking. You know, for the example, if you were going to pick classic, you didn't have to do the classic electives all 3 days. Each day was its own choice. Right. So that folks that had never been to Israel before, or if you were accompanying someone who'd never been to Israel before, and going to Masada and the Dead Sea was definitely a part of that experience. Right. You could do that on Tuesday, but then for the Thursday elective, you could do the culinary elective. It was important to get a variety of people on the trip to have choices. Mm-hmm. Because this trip was for someone who had been to Israel 10 times, or if it was their first time, like you. I will say that Masada and Dead Sea elective was the most popular. We sent 2 buses down there. You saw that?
Yeah, oh, yes. There were and felt it in the tram ride up. Yeah. It was a very congested ride to the top.
But basically what we thought is that if it was anyone's first time in Israel and or people picking the classic Israel track, we had to make those choices happen. Mm-hmm. And I'm pleased overall on the 3 days of electives. We had over a 90% placement rating for people that chose, when you chose electives, it was your first, second, or third choice. And over 90% of people got their first choice on 2, if not 3 of the days. The reason why some people didn't get their first choice is because we had a couple electives that didn't end up being so popular, so we decided not to run them because we wanted to make sure we had a critical mass at each elective. Yeah. But overall, we've gotten great feedback from how those worked. And then even the days that weren't elective days were full of choices. Yeah. Wednesday, our day down in the desert, you know, did you want to go rappelling or Jeep riding or baking, you know, it was all about choosing your own Israel adventure.
And the hardest part was making the choice sometimes. It is like, I wanted to do rappelling, and I did do rappelling, but the baking sounded really fun. Is there any way I could squeeze in? And there was no way to squeeze in both of those things, but yeah, you have to choose, and that's okay. Like, life is about making choices sometimes, right? And you got to take your pick.
It is. And, I mean, as the educator in me and also as the Jewish professional in me, I'm hoping that this means that you realize there's more you want to do in Israel and you're planning your next trip.
I mean, to me, that's sort of the one downside of it, is that we could have spent the week in any one of the stops and still not hit everything we wanted to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, if someone were to come visit you in Minneapolis and said, you know, I want to do everything possible in the state of Minnesota in a week, how would you plan that out?
Oh, boy. would need a lot of help.
Yeah. and Minnesota is bigger than Israel.
Yes, that is true.
So just to put it in perspective.
Yes, very true. No, and that was I guess coming up with the ideas for the electives, was that a you thing, MJF staff thing, working with Via Sabra, the tour company in Israel? Like, how did you go about picking the options people had?
Sure, it's a great question. So our co-chairs had a real strong sense in the types of electives that they wanted offered based on things they had done before, interests they thought people would have. And early on, one of the brainstorming sessions, I mean, there was a list of over 100 different ideas for electives, and then we started grouping those together. Okay, this all fits in culinary. This all fits in culture. This all fits in classic, to kind of name some of those sections. And then working with our partners with Jaffe and JDC and working with our great tour provider Via Sabra, just figuring out how we were going to make each of those electives come alive, what the choices were going to be. Being that it was a federation mission, we definitely wanted to have a lot of partnership opportunities with our Jaffe and JDC partners. For example, Tuesday in Jerusalem, one of the electives took people to Susan's House, which is a great program that helps teens that need support that they're not getting from home and gives them employment, meaningful work, and for our participants to be able to go and hear their stories, support the work that they're doing by buying things in the shop that they're making things to create for. We want things to feel like they're coming full circle back to who we're supporting as a community.
Right, and I know that was one of the neat things about the surfing, the adventure elective in Tel Aviv, which was surfing, that we learned about a program that the JDC supports for at-risk youth.
Yes, Hagal Shali is an amazing program. Hagal Shali is my wave, and I was actually part of my COVID project was getting my master's certificate in Israel education from George Washington University and the I Center in Chicago.
Okay.
And so a month before the trip, I went to it's called ICON. It's the I Center conference in Chicago, which is a fabulous conference. We could do a whole nother session on that. But Effie, who is one of the directors of Hagal Shali, was there, and we connected there, knowing we were going to have this as part of the trip.
Yeah.
So he and I were able to sit down, and he shared such a great story with me. Did he tell you about the wetsuits for girls when you guys were there?
I don't think he did.
So this is a beautiful story. So Hagal Shali works with teens that, another organization that works with teens that need more support. So they had a group of Muslim girls, a group of Arab girls that were Muslim, come and want to take surfing lessons. And the organizer was talking to them and said, but they can't wear traditional wetsuits. So they were able to get skirts for the wetsuits for these girls to wear so they could come do surfing lessons. All girls swimming together do these surfing lessons, which are taught by, now older teens or young adults that have graduated from their programming. Yeah. And then a few weeks later, they were reached out to by a girls' yeshiva who wanted to bring their Jewish Orthodox girls to come learn how to surf. And the head of the yeshiva had the same question of these girls can't go out in wetsuits, it's not modest enough. And they said, well, we actually have skirts that we have in our uniform collection, our wetsuit collection. And it's a beautiful show of how not only Arabs and Jews are working together and learning together, but also how these organizations are working with everybody that lives in Israel. Yeah. So I thought that was a really neat story.
And I think it's a great illustration of just how culturally Jews and Muslims aren't necessarily all that different. There's a lot of commonality in things like that.
Girls just want to learn how to surf.
That's right.
I mean, there's beauty in that statement too.
Absolutely.
I'll take it.
Absolutely. It was a great morning despite what Noah and Sam Farber described as some spectacular face plants by me into the water.
I hope someone got pictures.
Maybe from the drone. I think we had the photographer there from Via Sabra. I think hopefully they got one of me eating the water.
I'll let you know when I review them in a few
days.
That
would be great. Send them my way. It was I got up once and that was great, and it was just fun to get out there and try. And yes, it was a very early morning for the last morning in Tel Aviv, but it was totally worth it. And hearing the story and meeting Effie and the instructors was great. It totally made the failed attempts and the early start 100% worth the effort.
Well, and just so it all comes full circle, his parents live here in Minneapolis.
Yes.
So
Yes, they do, which is great also. So I know he'll be back, probably not in the winter to
Yes.
visit, but
I don't blame him.
I would. I don't either. I don't either. But what kind of feedback did you get from people? Like overall, what did people say was the best elective? And obviously, there are so many of them that people could do. But like, what did people really? What were they into the most?
So the fun and really the honest truth of that is that everybody thought their elective was the best. We have a post-trip survey that we're getting responses on. You know, our post-trip to the UAE just finished Sunday night, Monday morning with people coming home. So we have people that are just really returning. Ran into one participant yesterday at Yum for lunch, and she walked in, and I said, "How are you standing right now?" You know, knowing she had just gotten back.
Right.
But I think the geopolitical and security electives were very popular.
I heard that was incredible.
Yeah, the speakers for both of those were just phenomenal. And look, one of the neat things, there's so many neat things about the electives, but on each day, the topics were not all offered on every day. And if someone did culinary all 3 days, it was a different choice because we were in different parts of the country.
Right.
Tuesday, we were heading down south. Thursday, we were heading towards Rehovot, to our partnership city. And then Sunday, we were in Tel Aviv. So even if someone chose the same topic, they were doing really different things. They were all fabulous. I got to participate in the culture one at Kol Ha'ot in Jerusalem on Tuesday, which Rabbi Matt Berkowitz did a wonderful lesson for us. And I have the piece of art there sitting on the table. We're going to frame it and put it up. And,
oh, that's awesome.
Everyone that was there just really enjoyed working together and learning together. And they were all great. They were all the best.
I mean, I had done the culinary, the Thursday one, so we went to the goat farm and had some amazing cheeses.
Yeah.
So great. My allergies did not love the goat farm. And I knew there was a good chance of that going in, but like, you know, whatever. And then to Rehovot for a phenomenal Ethiopian food lunch at a great restaurant there.
Yeah, Gojo was terrific.
Gojo was terrific.
Yeah.
It was so good. And then, you know, went for a walk for a little snack for ice cream later in the day. That was I think unscheduled. That was an unplanned stop, but it was nice to get out and sort of stretch our legs and see the city a little bit.
Hey, ice cream in Jerusalem is always a good idea.
Yeah.
Or in Israel,
anywhere.
not just Jerusalem. Right?
Anywhere, yes. Anywhere is a good idea. So yeah, it was totally, you know, it was great. And yes, I definitely could have done culinary all 3 days and tried different Israeli foods along the way. But again, like needing to do the classics also.
Right. Well, and the whole trip was a culinary experience. Right?
I didn't understand all the food the first night. Like there was at least 2 main courses there. And even like after the hors d'oeuvres, walking into the main room, somebody's like, wait, they're serving us dinner? What did we just have? There's just, yeah.
Yeah, it's that Israeli hospitality of, you know, it's even more than, you know, your Jewish mother wanting you to eat. Yeah. Yeah, it was a spectacular evening.
It was incredible. I mean, the whole trip was. The food everywhere was fantastic. So what's next? I know global experiences, like I've talked to Slil about this. I know the global experiences at MJF it's an important thing, especially now that we're out of COVID, whatever it is right now, I guess, right? So what's the next big thing for Federation in that regard?
So it's really exciting. Federation is really happy to have the Global Experiences program be picking back up again, I guess you could say. I mean, we've done things. We've had a great momentum trip. We've had a honeymoon in Israel trip. There's been smaller trips happening. This, of course, was the biggest thing that we've ever done.
The trip, yes.
But the idea is that the community traveling together builds relationships. It builds an understanding. There's a lot of things to see out there. Yeah. You know, we live in a big world, and Minnesota's a great state, but there's a lot of things to see elsewhere. And so there's going to be a lot of global experiences coming up in the future. We have a couple great co-chairs that are working on making sure that we have a good path in place. We're working with different community groups. to have some partnerships with upcoming global experiences. I'm not at liberty quite to release too much information just yet. But,
I sort of sensed we were going in that direction. Your vagueness was impressive.
But just know that there's some really exciting announcements coming very soon. And I promise I'll get them to you.
I'm excited to see it. And I do think it's great the way that, and one of the things that's impressed me with the types of travel and the types of places, but the fact that it's sort of throughout the Federation organization. So Yala with their JDC partnership,
Yes.
JDC Antoine partnership.
Yes.
There's a Greece trip coming up with registration open, I believe, for that.
Yeah, I'm not sure where we are with that.
Okay.
Yes.
But I know that's coming up, and that partnership is pretty unique in sort of in the JDC world.
Yes. I mean, Gabe Herstig has done a great job with all of our Yala programming in general, and that JDC Entwine partnership is something really important to us at Federation. Our Momentum trip, right now applications are open for the November Momentum trip, which is for moms in the community. And we have a lot of good applicants coming in for that. I know Sleal's been working on starting to get the interviews going for that. Jen Bucklew staffed our last Momentum trip, and we were so glad that she was able to do that from our staff. And let me just take a minute to talk about our great staff team that we took on Experience Israel with us.
There was a lot of
I say, like, I get to be the face that everybody knows was part of the mission, but there was such a strong team making this all happen, and I can't say enough for how everybody just jumped in and was, on buses and off buses and at the registration desks and just making sure everyone had what they needed.
And like, as somebody who was as a participant on it, it was nice to see, like, to get to even just chat for a few minutes with staff that I don't really otherwise, like, I sort of know who they are and we say hello, but like to get even just a few minutes to feel like I'm connecting with them was kind of nice.
I'm so glad to hear you say that.
Yes.
I mean, look, like, Federation as an organization is an organization, but it's the people that work, at each one of these desks and stations that you see here down the hall. Like, there's so many different wonderful things happening, and bringing a large staff team on the trip was really important to me. One, because I wanted to make sure that the staff had support. Yes. Because if we had a small team, it would have been a lot of us doing a lot of things. This way, it was a big team with a lot of us doing a lot of things. But it let everyone have time with community members. It let everyone have time as a staff. These experiences are only going to make us better coming back and doing our jobs here. Anytime I mentioned to Jim that, I thought, okay, we need to make sure this is the amount of staff we have and this is why it's important, he didn't even hesitate. He's like, okay.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, but you were sort of the face of it. Yes, there was a lot of staff there who could answer questions, but you were still the point person on all decisions at some point, I imagine, ran through you. Did you get to enjoy the experience as well? Or were you too mired in the work things to be able to really enjoy?
So I enjoyed every minute of leading up to the trip. I enjoyed every minute of being on the trip. I'm enjoying all these conversations and interactions I'm having with people now that we're home from the trip. The reason why I can say that really with a smile on my face is because of the staff team from Federation, from our partners at Via Sabra. I mean, they're the ones that hired the tour guides for us. They made sure we had our buses. We made sure all the reservations were done. So as much as I was the point person for here, it was only because I had all these other people working together to make this all a successful experience.
I mean, we had, we just interacted with so many different guides along the way, and it was, just had such great experiences. Our guide at Masada was phenomenal. Just not just with the information, but the way he told the story really made it feel very vivid for something that's, thousands of years
that's
in
awesome.
Our history. It was amazing.
Well, there's something about experiential learning and walking on the places where you're learning about the history that happened there. It can't get much more experiential than that.
No.
To put your hand on one of those stone walls that is still there just because, it's able to preserve itself.
Right.
It's the people that lived and died on Masada had a story of resiliency that we can learn about. I don't know if we ever fully understand.
Yes.
It's a pretty spectacular story. I was talking to one of the rabbis that came on the trip with us, and he had been at Masada, and he was talking about a couple of the stories that he had had with people just, walking around the top of Masada. And I mean, look, I just take a second to just name that the clergy that came on the trip was phenomenal.
I was going to go there, but I'll let you just jump the question. That's fine.
And part of the reason why they were all so phenomenal was that they were as much a part of everything happening as any of the rest of us were. But bringing their experience and their knowledge to be able to add to different conversations, to, be able to reflect back with people after a special moment for the day. I'll let you ask your formal question.
And that's sort of it. It's that all of these clergy have all been to Israel a number of times and just sort of seamlessly slotted in like regular tourists, just like the rest of us were. So it was kind of awesome. And the fact that it was participation. I know this is something that was like mentioned by the staff, by the co-chairs a number of times, but it feels meaningful that you had Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, you had cantors and rabbis, and Chazan, because Chazan Delkin, I don't want to, feel like I'm giving short shrift to her title. I know she goes by. It feels very meaningful that you did have from across the religious spectrum of Twin Cities Judaism.
And that was really important. Coming at this as a community trip, it needed to represent the community in so many ways. So I'll use our Shabbat dinner choices as an example. Yeah. So Friday night, there was 8 different choices for Shabbat dinner. Very early on, I knew in my vision for the trip, look, so much, even when I got hired, a lot of the trip had been visioned out already, but there were certain pieces that we got to work on together. One of the things that I said early on was Friday night, we should have small Shabbat dinner experiences. We're going to have a whole week that everyone's going to have these big dinners together and stuff like that. Shabbat is a chance for reflection. And I had been meeting with the clergy. We had 2 meetings with the clergy early on, which was also really nice for all of them to come together for a variety of reasons and thinking about and brainstorming things for the trip. And I had asked each of them to host one of those Shabbat dinners. And so we wanted to have a variety of dinners. 4 of them were going to be at one of the hotels, so they were, kosher, within walking distance, all the things for that. And then 4 of them were through an organization called Eat With, which they're at-home chefs that create these culinary experiences in their homes or spaces that they have carved out. And so even with those experiences, there was one in North Tel Aviv that you had to get on a bus and drive to. Right? But for a wide swath of our community, getting on a bus and driving on Shabbat is not an issue. People are comfortable with that transportation.
That's right.
The kashrut levels were different at those different private experiences. But having the variety of transportation, kashrut levels, what the observances were going to be around the table, that reflects the community. Yeah. And so the clergy were all very happy to jump in and host those different dinners. And that meant different things for the different dinners.
Right, absolutely.
Which dinner did you go to?
I went to, with Chef John, at Rabbi Weininger and Chazan Delkin.
Oh, nice, at Carmel Market.
At Carmel Market. And I chose that one not because I'm an Adath member along with my family, and I'm very familiar and friendly with both of them. To me, it just sounded like the most interesting meal. And I will say, I know I chose, and the first thing I told my wife, I chose right because Zoharit and Matt Heilicher picked that one also. And I was lucky enough to get to sit next to Zoharit and talk the food and get the education on just everything and the flavors. And I'm like, I chose right because I had that experience.
It had her stamp of approval on it. That's pretty good.
She approved. I chose right.
Yeah. I won't disagree. She's one of our Global Experience Committee co-chairs, her and Jody Upin, and they're fabulous for a variety of reasons.
Absolutely.
But yeah, just with the clergy, it was so special that we had representation from all across our community. One of the things that I really enjoyed doing leading up to the trip was I was shul hopping at the different synagogues that the clergy was coming from.
Okay.
Because I wanted to kind of, get to know them in their own spaces, and I was seeing participants in that way. And some of the synagogues that did a pre-trip blessing ahead of time, I was able to go to some of those, which was really nice. And the clergy themselves will be the first to tell you that they got to know each other in a way that they haven't been able to do just by doing their jobs here in Minneapolis, right? They all have full-time jobs. But to be able to...
Very full-time jobs.
Yes. But unlike or similar to our experiences, when you travel with people, you have a chance to have different conversations and different shared experiences. And Saturday night in Tel Aviv, before Shabbat was over, I was sitting in the lobby at Royal Beach, and Rabbi Lakitz and Rabbi Kalatsky both, we kind of all met up at the same time, and they were reflecting on the first time they really had a chance to meet each other was at our pre-trip event at Bear Cave Brewery, and that they were talking to each other and started sharing, excitement about the trip. And I don't think they'll mind me saying this, that they really got to know each other on this trip. And that Saturday night, they were both unfortunately having to leave before everything was over on Sunday. But they were saying, wishing each other well and saying they were looking forward to seeing each other back in Minneapolis.
That's
so
fantastic.
Yeah.
And I think so many people, myself included, take for granted the fact that not all clergy know each other or have that kind of relationship with each other.
Yeah.
You sort of assume, it's, a small community of rabbis. Of course you're all friendly and know each other. But that's clearly not the case. It's not that they're, not friendly, but just because of the nature of the jobs and what they do and the communities they work within, they may not have the opportunities to that this trip presented.
Yeah. And look, our Minnesota Rabbinical Association helps get some of them together some of the time.
Right.
But it's not all of them. And so our 9 clergy that came on the trip with us, they were spectacular. And Hazan Dalkin, at one point, I was asking her to do something kind of last minute, and she's like, it's really easy for me to say yes because I don't have to worry about any of the other logistics right now. I'm here and I can say yes. And she says yes to things very easily anyways. But but it was really nice. I knew that I could look at any of them at any moment and just say, can you help me with this? And I didn't even have to finish the sentence, and they were figuring out how to help. So it was great. So
the trip is done. I'm sure the closing up work is not done, and that's going to take some time for you. But
do you see all the piles around?
Yes, this is what happens. This is an audio medium, not a visual one, but I will tell you that, yes, I can attest to the fact that there are piles of T-shirts on one table. There are people's picture cutouts from the opening event on another. There's all kinds of trip-related paraphernalia around your office here. But ignoring all that for a sec, what's next once things wrap up? What's next for you? Because obviously the Experience Israel 2023 mission is more or less, completed.
Yeah, makes me sad thinking about that.
No, it is. It is sad thinking about. Obviously, so much work, and then in a week or 2, depending on what add-ons, it's done.
Yeah. Look, the trip itself is over, but the ripple effect that we're going to see in our community, we're going to be seeing for years to come, which I'm starting with next Tuesday. We're going to having our first trip reunion at Bethel for the concert. So I know we have a great number of participants that have already RSVP'd to see each other at our pre-concert reunion on Tuesday, which is great. This position was a contract position for me to come in and be the mission coordinator. I'm very excited to say that Federation has asked me to stay in my next capacity, and that'll be coming out very soon.
Very exciting. That is very exciting.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited to hear that's going to be. Obviously, it can't be announced yet, but I'm excited to hear what I'm excited to hear the news once that's out, though. That is very exciting that you're going to be staying on whatever capacity that is. Whenever that gets announced, we'll be excited to hear about it.
Thank you.
Obviously, again, as somebody who experienced the trip, the one thing I told people, and I don't think this is something you would disagree with, there were so many ways that things could have gone very pear-shaped. Because of the number of options and the number of opportunities people had to do their own things and make the experience whatever they wanted to make it themselves. But, you threw a party in the middle of the desert.
That was pretty spectacular.
That is beyond, yes. Check the TC Jewfolk Instagram. We have a ton of pictures from that night with Shai Sabari.
I have to say that one of the personal highlights of the trip for me was being able to introduce Shai Sabari that night. That was, I think, my smile went from ear to ear.
It lit up the desert. There is no question.
It was pretty exciting.
But there were so many ways that this could have gone weird, and not even for so many of because of just the politics and everything that can happen in Israel. Not because of anything like that, just community can be fickle sometimes. And there were 250 of us in buses and in hotels and traveling around together. Like, it could have gotten funky, but it didn't. Like, it really all worked.
Well, thank you. I mean, look, I think that part of the beauty of this trip was that everyone signing up knew they were signing up for a big group trip. Mm-hmm. And there's some understanding that people need to come into the trip with about you're traveling on 7 buses. You know, like, it's a lot of people to move. Sometimes it may take a little longer than you think, but everyone's going to get there. I think very early on people realized no one was going to go hungry. You know, everyone was going to eat well during the week. Our speakers were top notch. Our guides were top notch. And I think everyone just took comfort in that and was willing to sit back and enjoy the ride for whichever path they were on.
You know, and one thing I want to go back to mention with the staff, I remiss if I didn't mention this just because I sort of know some of how it worked, but each of the staff members who went on the trip planned they had some responsibility in planning some of the evening some of the group activities. I know Grace Kaplan was sort of oversaw the Yom HaShoah event, which was just a beautiful night, and all the participants really, it was a very moving event. But like you talk about sort of, you're not just bringing the staff to work the tables, right? They have buy-in and their hands-on stuff throughout the week that people are doing, not just making sure that people get to the right room.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, the Federation staff that staffed the trip, we had monthly meetings for 6 months before the trip, and then a couple months before the trip, they were every 2 weeks we were meeting, because again, you know, like, I was the point person, but everyone had things to do.
Right.
And so, yeah, for the different evening events, we had staff as kind of taking ownership over those to coordinate everything on the ground. Yeah, I mean, Alyssa Huck was a huge help with a lot of our logistics and you know, making sure that was happening on the ground. Staff played to their strengths. Their staff were staffing to their strengths.
Right.
I agree. Grace just did a phenomenal job at the Yom HaShoah evening. Evan Pomish, one of our newer staff members.
Yep.
I mean, he's been around for a while now, but I still feel like he's kind of a new staff person. He helped with Sunday night, with our first night in Jerusalem, and he is so detail-oriented, and it was great. It was from getting the co-chairs in their costumes to making sure the souvenir pictures were ready to go.
I did jokingly tell him, well, you're done. You can, like, now enjoy the trip. Your event's out of the way. Now you can enjoy and have fun.
Yeah.
But even after that, he didn't look stressed or, like, he looked like it went like it was supposed to go.
Well, that's good. Look, it all did go how it was supposed to go.
Yes.
That's
Absolutely.
It did.
Well, last couple questions, and, you know, the ones we always end with. First, what is your favorite Jewish holiday?
So I think with the trip so fresh in my mind, and the fact that I've been a Holocaust educator for so many years, I don't know that favorite is my right word, but I think most meaningful right now is Yom HaShoah. Mm-hmm. The fact that the trip, you know, the second day of the trip, we started Yom HaShoah together, and I had never been in Israel for Yom HaShoah before, and being at the park after we did the food packing and being able to, this park is called Gan HaPalmon. It's the Liberty Bell Park. And because there's a replica of the Liberty Bell that was donated by, you know, the Federation in Philadelphia. It's a beautiful park, and it's right in the middle of Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. And knowing that everyone was going to be there, the siren was going to go off, so everything would stop for Yom HaShoah to take that minute. It just placed me. It made my feet feel really strong on the ground, and just I held that moment, and seeing our community stop and being able to feel that all together. It's a beautiful moment of the trip that I'm going to remember for a long time.
You know, it's one of those things that you see the video of every year. The videos come around of cars stopping on the highway or whatever roadway you're near, and they get out for the minute. But to experience it and stand in that park right next to the street and have buses and taxis stop and people get out and wait until the siren ends and gets back in the car and everything starts moving again. But there's a certain, you know, emotion that comes with that.
Yeah, no, 100%. And so much of why, I mean, I've been a Jewish communal professional for my entire career. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's great to teach about, to teach kids how to sing the 4 questions and to have them involved around the Passover table and to, figure out what mitzvah we can do during Hanukkah so that we're bringing light into other people's lives. And but remembering our past as a people makes all of that seem more poignant for me. And so right now I don't know that it's my favorite Jewish holiday, but I'm going to say it's my most meaningful holiday.
Which totally makes sense given the context and timing I found is everything with these questions. So I get that. And then, of course, what is your favorite Jewish food? We'll even expand to Israeli since all we did for the 2 weeks ago was eat our way through Israel.
Right. So one of the things that I always enjoyed in teaching the 8th graders at Talmud Torah was the section we did on Israeli food. Mm. And the truth is that a lot of the Israeli food is not really Israeli food. It might be Jewish food from different places, but not necessarily Israeli food. The one food that is really Israeli food is the sabich. The sabich sandwich, which is fried eggplant and an egg, and it's in a pita, and it's delicious. And do you know the story of that sandwich?
I don't know the story of that sandwich.
So there was a man who had a gas station, and truck drivers would stop at this gas station and want to get food to continue their routes. And he needed food that was easy for them to take and filling and go. And eggplant and eggs were pretty plentiful. Yeah. So he put this idea of this fried eggplant and egg sandwich together in a pita, and the truck drivers loved it, and it was easy. They could take it in their hands and go, and that's where that started. So the man that started the sandwich, his name was Sabich, that was his last name. And there was a place in Jerusalem right off the shuk that I had heard about that was really great for the Sabich sandwich, and I had that when we were in Jerusalem.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it's a long story to tell you that's my food of the moment.
Did it live up to the hype?
It was delicious.
Okay, good.
Yeah, it was. I have a picture from it. It was so good.
Absolutely. Well, Kara Rosenwald, thank you for joining me. Thank you for all of your hard work in putting such an amazing experience together. As a first-timer, it lived up to the hype, and in no small part thanks to all of your coworkers here hard work. So thank you for that, and thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for sharing your first time to Israel with Minneapolis Jewish Federation and Experience Israel 2023.
It was wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks, Lonny.
The Who the Folk podcast is part of the Jewfolk Podcast Network, a product of Jewfolk Inc. Please subscribe, rate, and review the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you have suggestions for other podcast guests, please email them to me at editor@tcjewfolk.com. For our other shows, check out tcjewfolk.com/podcast.